Yay. Okay. So then you have to get this comic book out of us, right?
Yeah, and I don't remember what the deadline
Designing
was.
all the characters, except for the kids.
The only thing I really did on my own was Friday, I think.
You did the snarks.
I did the rear half of the snarks.
The rear half, yeah, the funky
The kind of
legs.
grasshopper-ish legs, yeah.
But you did design, Carl designed Friday, this spaceship.
Yeah. And you came up with the name Power Pack.
Yeah, tell them what the...
Mean Machine, was that it?
Yeah, the original proposal had a very clever name to it, but the explanation is something that a reader just seeing a title on the stands, wouldn't get. It was originally called the Mean Machine, and the idea was that the kids wanted to be taken
And their
seriously.
last name was Mean.
It was?
Yeah, it would have been then.
I didn't realize
We changed their name after that.
So I thought, for someone just passing this on the rack, they're not going to be able to get the rationalization.
It was a terrible name. I just couldn't think of anything better. Okay.
So
Working title.
Right.
I was racking my brains for possible ideas, and I don't know. I think Power Pack was originally, that's what I used to call the things that ran my HO trains when I was a kid and all that stuff. So, and then you liked it, and then you changed the name of the family.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
And that was that.
Yeah.
And then I forget, whose idea was Bob to bring in on that? Was that yours or mine, or I can't
I don't
remember.
know, but thank goodness.
Yeah, oh yeah, he was...
Bob Wyachek.
Bob Wyachek.
He was a great match for June's work.
Yeah.
And, real professional.
Yeah, delicate line.
Yeah.
I mean, he caught the nuances, the subtleties of, of your interactions with the drawings and
It
stuff.
doesn't matter how well you draw, if you get the wrong inker, it can all be undone. A bad inker can ruin your work.
And destroy your enthusiasm for the next issue.
Yes, so I was really, really fortunate to work with Bob
It was probably your
Wyachek.
idea, I expect. You're the editor.
Probably, I guess. I don't know. Some things I retain perfectly. Other things are just...
It's lost in antiquity.
Yes, I know, it was a long time ago, really.
But I just remember, I have very eclectic tastes, and at the same time, I'm editing Power Pack. I've got The Punisher, I got Rocket Raccoon, I got Solomon Kane, I got Doctor Strange. I just like the variety. Some people seem to want to specialize in a certain part of the Marvel Universe or something, but variety is the spice of life for me, so it was
And
perfect.
this added variety.
Oh, yeah.
So how fully formed was your concept?
It was pretty fully formed. I mean, what I handed Shooter was a description of the kids, a verbal description, and then, of course, with June's addition of drawings, a first plot completed, although I don't think I had paged it out because I don't think I knew it was 48 pages at that point.
Yeah.
And short synopses of the next 4 because I thought it was going to be a miniseries if I got lucky. So I never went beyond issue 4 where the kids end up, coming back, saving the day essentially. And then after that, you had to design the costumes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
The costumes. I did come up with Friday. Whitey, the chameleon.
In my mind, Whitey was going to be more of a rabbit because I was imprinted with Alice in Wonderland when I was 3 years old. My grandmother read me Alice in Wonderland, which is a very bizarre thing to read to a 3-year-old. And it's thrown images in my mind. I have been redoing Alice in Wonderland for the past 50 years. I find out, I write a story and I say, there's the white rabbit, there's this, there's that, there's the other.
That's a good template.
But what June did...
Yeah, I had some different ideas.
It was much better. I mean, it didn't, it was just, I wanted a cool-looking alien, and he was, the chameleons that you designed were wonderful.
Well, thank you. It was based, people often say the chameleons are based on a horse. Almost right. Tried to base it on a seahorse. If you look at the snout and the jaw lines, and even instead of a mane, it has that sort of seahorse frill on it. Of course, seahorses don't have legs.
At that
so
time,
I had to give them some
I
legs.
usually had like a couple of tiny aquariums on the shelf in my office. At one time, I had a seahorse, and one of them, was that around then or no? I don't know if that's what put the bug in your head or...
No,
Or if
I
I
don't
got it
think so.
afterwards.
I just wanted to do something different. And I thought about horses, but then I thought, well, seahorse looks more different. And
Sure.
so,
Yeah, they have little turnip noses, too.
Yeah.
They're sweet looking. So that was pretty much, I guess, I had it pretty solidly, except for what everything looked like.
Well, even if you hadn't scripted it out beyond that first adventure, the characters you came up with, the children, were so, well developed. They were already these little individuals that, not to say that you didn't have to work, but when you have really good characters like that, the stories
itself.
write themselves. You
Yeah.
just think, well, what would Julie do? What
Yeah,
would Jack do?
exactly.
You give them, something to react to and line them up and let them
And they
go.
react to it in their own way because they are who they are.
Right.
And I had like such an easy job. We used to turn in a plot. I'd read it. I'd smile. And I'd go, here, June.
Yeah, but then the hard part was me giving you back the story. It was really hard for me in the beginning to meet the deadlines. I had no idea what I was doing. No idea.
But
And yet,
Floundering
it was
around,
so beautiful.
Yeah.
With these gestures and expressions and just, I don't think you appreciate how great those first issues were.
I look back and I look back at them now. I'm like, well, actually, they were fine.
great.
Considering everything, they were fine. So.
Yeah.
And like I said, it was like being tossed into the ocean. So, I can't do a 22-page story, draw a 22-page story a month. So I never took that on. We figured out that you could do like pretty much 4 issues in a 5-month period. So we'd try and plan out where we'd have another story in there. And Wheezy buttered up her editor by picking subjects that she knew I had interest in, like aquariums and the New York Mets.
Yeah, we did a baseball fill-in with Brent Anderson, which he drew that one. And then we went to the aquarium.
At Coney Island.
At Coney Island, and photographed the whole thing.
We had to research this stuff,
Yeah,
so we
it
took
was
a day off
important.
and go.
This is before Google Images.
Yes, oh yeah. So we have photographs. I probably still have photographs of all that stuff somewhere.
I'd like to see those.
Yeah.
Now, the characters are younger than the typical Marvel heroes. So is there an idea that the adventures have to be a little bit more, all ages? And maybe if Spider-Man's a guest star, maybe the threats aren't as big, or
Well, I don't know.
I don't think we were ever conscious of that.
We were perfectly willing to destroy the world.
Yeah, they were involved with these big X-Men crossovers that were,
Oh yeah, they went down to the sewers during the mutant massacre, and
But some of the stories, some of the things you did to the parents were pretty dark.
oh yeah, I was cruel. I'm not a nice person.
There were some times when the parents were in a coma, basically.
Yeah, the mom was in a coma.
And, and was separated from the children. And for a child, that's, like
Yeah.
your worst nightmare.
Yeah, I'm pretty rotten.
and then tell them who the parents are based on.
Oh, well, June drew the parents, so they were based on me and Walter.
Yes.
And I named them so they were based on my sister Margaret and her husband Jim. And honestly, Margaret and I look alike. Margaret's about, 5 inches shorter than I am. But we actually look kind of alike, so it really worked out. And Katie, Margaret named her youngest child Katie. So Katie gets to be...
And where did they live?
where did they live? They lived down
In your apartment.
Okay. Oh, yes, that's true. They did. They lived on the Upper West Side,
Apartment 3D.
apartment 3D on West 71st Street, which was our apartment. Walter and my apartment. When you go in and you look at the comic, you can see the paintings are on the walls that we had on the walls. The dining room table is where the dining room table was. It's all arranged just so. The schools were the Upper West Side schools. We photographed those too.
Right.
PS 87 and IS 44. And, it was, in fact, John Brigman, who took over the book after June, thought Walter and I probably, he phoned us on the phone cold just because he wanted to get into comics, and loved Power Pack. And he thought that we probably lived in the Upper West Side in Manhattan, which he also did. He lived on a boat in the boat basin, because he recognized locale.
Oh, I didn't
June had
realize
drawn
that.
it so beautifully that he said, "Oh gosh, they live in the Upper West Side. They must live right near me," which was probably we did about
that's funny.
6 blocks away.
I'm glad he wasn't a stalker. It would turn out badly.
So back in the olden days, you could just call people up and say, "Hi, I want to get into comics," and somebody would talk to you.
Right.
Walter spent about an hour on the phone talking to him, and then he came into your office.
Well, we were there, and his samples had no kids in them. But when we were closing his portfolio, after talking to him, those little side pockets inside out slide out a couple of sketches he did of his neighbor's kids, and our eyes lit up. And it's like they're,
Yeah.
I just happened to be in the
Really
office,
good.
so it was all serendipitous, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Things like that. There was a period, up there where everything just seemed to click and mosey along when it should and how it should and all that, even if times were, difficult to get things done sometimes, but it just seemed like
Like magic.
Yeah, it was a magical
It's a great time. Great time to
Yeah.
be in comics.
Yep.
So the Power Pack ends up in X-Men. It ends up, I think, Franklin from the Fantastic Four gets wrapped up a little bit. So you get embraced pretty quickly by the creators in the Marvel Universe. So how does that work for you? Is this something where you're kind of, talking about plots, maybe you're pitching, like, hey, how about you have them in this issue? Or is it just organic and they're looking at the work and saying this is great?
We felt sorry for Franklin. June and I did. Poor little Franklin.
He's a sad little
His parents
boy.
were always going off and leaving him. They would go off and they would say, okay, and he didn't have anybody to play with. So we thought we would bring him into our little group and so he could have some friends.
That's probably my favorite story arc that we
Yeah.
did was when we brought Franklin in, and then there was the kid who fell to earth.
Right.
When
Which was
Kofi shows
Kofi, when
up.
Kofi shows up.
And I love the dynamics between Franklin and Katie.
Yes.
Who Katie was used to being the spoiled baby, and now here little Franklin comes along as she feels like he's trying to steal her thunder, and they had this really contentious relationship before they finally
They worked it out.
Yeah, they worked it
Yeah.
out.
I forget, how did he end up getting his own costume?
I think it was at the end of one of the issues.
Friday gave him a costume too.
Yeah.
Because
Freddie could
do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
We did some things now. I get my judgment now when it's like I was editing The Punisher and he shows up in Power Pack. That was a little weird. Well, I'm surprised you didn't give me pushback on that, or was that your idea? I can't even remember.
I don't even remember. Who remembers?
And isn't there the famous cover with Wolverine about to impale someone?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's got, who did that? He's holding up Katie, I think, and has his
Yeah.
claws out.
Yeah.
I can't remember
that
who
John?
did that.
Was that one of ours? Might have been one of Chris's. I can't remember.
Or I can't remember. Who did. I
Who
didn't
knows?
draw it.
You didn't do that one. I didn't.
One of the things that we found out right away, though, is that
Might have been Bog.
amongst the professionals, when the first issue came out, it was like universal admiration for the book. All the other professionals that read it, people that you wouldn't think normally be into such things, Byrne liked it a lot.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
he did.
That's right. When he was doing the Fantastic Four. And when we wanted to borrow Franklin, he was perfectly fine with it. And, yeah, no problem. And then, I think I did take some liberties with some of the characters, like Dragon Man. I think my Dragon Man was not exactly what other people had done with Dragon Man.
I love Dragon Man.
I know, I did too. But I love my version. So, or our version, because you did a really cute
We
Dragon
did
Man.
almost like a fairy tale
Yeah, it was.
version
Yeah,
of Dragon
we did.
Man.
We did. So, but I never caught any flack from anybody about using any of the other characters. I guess we cleared it with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the policy. If you were guest starring a character who was edited by a different editor, you would give that editor the plot to approve how that character was being used, and they usually not always, but sometimes they would check out the final book before it left too, to make sure you weren't putting words in their mouth that didn't sound like a character or something. Some editors were much more into doing that, and others were lax or too harried and harassed to care. So that's why you get sometimes some quite different interpretations of the same character in different books. So.
And what about the Power Pack, I guess, special issue about the, was it child sex abuse, or was it drugs?
I think we did sex abuse.
Sex abuse. So how did that come about?
They asked us to.
Okay.
I don't think June drew that one. I think Mary Wilshire drew that one. Right?
They asked me to draw it, and I didn't have time.
I'm sure
because
you were very-
I think I did some layouts, and Mary finished it.
Right.
Mary Wilshire
Yeah.
finished the pencils on that.
But yeah, it's a delicate issue, but it's important. You know, what to do if you are, you know, being abused in some way. And, you know, there were a number of, it was physical abuse and emotional abuse and I guess sexual abuse and maybe something else, I don't remember. But so each of us were given that as a focus, and for some reason they asked me to do the sexual abuse one. And so, you know, you handle it. And then we put information, of course, in the, you know, what to do and where to go and who to call if you need to call somebody. And that was all important information. It was reprinted in newspapers, yes?
I don't know.
I think it was, because I think people had told me that.
There was another project that was a graphic novel someone brought up to me today to sign that had to do with Power Pack and Cloak and Dagger, dealing with Covenant House and Runaways and all that.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, that was Matlow, I think, wrote that one.
Yeah, Matlow wrote that. Sal Valuto did the art on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, we've turned out a lot of stuff.
I know. It goes on and on.
So you get past the initial 4 issues that you have in your mind. How do you start to just kind of build the rest of that universe and keep telling their stories? I guess you said that the characters came to life. So, you know, at what point do you start to just let them show you where the adventure goes?
Well, you know, I mean, they had to move, when they moved to New York, we had to move them to New York, first of all, so we gave the dad a job at Columbia University, physics teacher, I think, physics professor. And, you know, so what do you do when you're in New York and you're a kid? You go look for Spider-Man. I mean, it's just logic, right? And, you know, so, you know, once you're in New York, it's not hard. There's so many opportunities.
Well, the city is like a character.
It is like a
really,
character.
with all its different neighborhoods. It's almost like different facets of a really interesting character.
That's so true.
So it's a good sandbox.
Yeah, it is. It is, and a kind of a cool-looking sandbox too, in a lot of ways. And because I was doing X Factor at the time, and then eventually New Mutants, we were able to cross some of those characters into the Power Pack book as well.
Now, how soon after Power Pack started did you leave staff to concentrate on writing?
Oh gosh, I think it was after they asked me to write X Factor, and I was doing maybe a Spider-Man series. I started getting so much writing work that it wasn't fair for me to be there as an editor, because I was being about very half-assed about editing at that point. Annie Nacenti was my assistant, and she was taking over a lot of it. I mean, she was very good at what she did. And there was sort of, when I saw how good Annie was, there was no reason for me to be there anyway, so I just said, I'll go freelance and let Annie do it. And she did a good job.
Yeah, she saved my butt a few times, because when I started off there, I inherited her when I took over from Al Milgram, and I had no idea what the hell I was doing. So
I know, I know. Not I know that, but I know that feeling.
Yeah. So it was good to have an experienced person in the office to share with.
Yeah.
And let's talk about putting the band back together. You recently did another Power Pack series.
We did a mini-series, 5 issues.
So what's that like going back after, you know, the time off?
For me, it was a little scary in that I kept hoping that I was writing the voices of the kids properly. I mean, this is, for me, how many years later? 40 years later?
Don't say 40.
We did the grow up
Say
issue.
10.
Yeah, we did the grow up issue.
So
and
that was that.
And that one made me nervous too, because I'm talking and thinking, oh God, did I get the voices right? Because the voices are so important. You know, am I too old for this? Oh my God, I'm ancient. Oh, so I don't know. Anyway, June, but you did great. You bailed me out. It all looked great.
Thanks. It was nice to return to these characters all these years later. Now I feel I know more of what I'm doing. It's not such a struggle. The storytelling aspect of comics was really difficult for me. I did not grow up reading comics. I didn't read a comic book until I met my now husband, then boyfriend, who was into comics, and he had to teach me how to follow the dialogue, which panel to go to next. And that was kind of a blessing and a curse. It was good because it made my work look different. I wasn't a clone of Jack Kirby or Neil Adams or any other popular artists at the time, but it was really difficult for me because I just didn't understand the symbolism, the visual language of comics, so it was nice to return to these characters, that I really began my career with, and now I feel I'm a much more confident artist. So it wasn't such a painful struggle. I could enjoy it more this time around. It was nice to get a second chance.
Yeah. You did some real pretty stuff in outer space, I think, with that one.
That was fun.
Yes.
Outer space is always fun.
I know you like outer space.
Because you don't have to do buildings.
Yeah.
Were you able to work any cats in?
I don't think so. I don't remember a cat.
There was a cat, I think, that time when they went down the sewers with the Morlocks.
Yes, there was.
There was a cat.
There was.
I don't know what happened to that cat.
I remember, actually. I think they rescued the cat and they gave it to Leech.
Right.
Because Leech
was lonely. He didn't have
a friend.
There
right.
you go. Now I remember.
You see, even the cats get taken care of.
I remember we had a nice little lunch party for the first issue at the Westchester Mall.
That's right.
What's that
It was
store?
Heroes. It was a comic book shop called
Something Heroes or Heroes something, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a small chain at the time.
Yeah.
So we were all there, and Terry Austin was also there, and Paul Smith and all that. Yeah. It was there's that one picture of us standing around. I forgot to hold it like that.
Gosh, we're all such babies.
Oh, God, I know we were.
Gosh, yeah.
You particularly were very young.
I was a baby.
But yeah, it was fun. I don't know. During that big chunk of that period, that time, I just I knew that working at Marvel in general, was just like, the best situation I could have ever been in. And I knew it was rare, but I didn't realize how rare it was until later in my career. That was sort of a magical period.
Oh, yeah, it was the golden ages when we were there, for I think for creators anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
So speaking of creators, now I know, June, that Carl helped you a bit with, giving you notes on your art. So how do you kind of take those notes and improve without feeling like, drat, somebody's giving me a hard time? And
when it comes from somebody as knowledgeable as Carl, it doesn't feel like an imposition one bit. You're just grateful for the help. I mean, Carl literally has written the book on
storytelling.
On storytelling that I teach part-time. I teach sequential art part-time. I taught SCAD for 9 years, and now I'm at Kennesaw State University in Georgia. And that, when I do my syllabus and I have required reading, that's the book. I use Carl's book. So when it comes from somebody that they know what they're talking about. I mean, Carl helped me. My other sort of mentor and teacher was Bob McLeod, who I met at one of the first conventions I ever went to, and I was showing I wasn't working professionally yet, I was showing my work to different professionals who would most of them would say something like, yeah, kid, good work, go home, try some more, and I showed my work to Bob, and I can't exactly repeat what he said because this is a family atmosphere, but he basically, it wasn't a very nice thing. And I thought, this is a guy that can teach me something. And I started sending him, I asked if I could send him samples, send him work in the mail. And because this was, of course, before the internet, so I would send him things in the mail, and he would critique it, do these very detailed critiques on tracing paper, redrawing. And I kept doing it, and then he started charging me because, well, not much, it wasn't much, but I found out later the reason he did that is that he was trying to get rid of me because these were his words. He said, "I didn't think you would make it." Of course, now I'm like, how do you like me now? You know, but he was tough, but I learned a lot from him. I mean, he was, if I had a teacher to point to, I'd say it was Bob. And Bob McLeod, nice. He is the creator of the New Mutants.
Isn't he downstairs?
He's downstairs.
Yeah, he's down there. We're next to where you are now, right?
Yeah, he's here. So you can go and say, "Hey, Bob." You know.
Do you remember what it was that gave you and Roy the confidence that this was the time to head north?
We were young and stupid. My now husband, Roy Richardson, he's really the one who got me interested in comics. Like I said, I never read a comic book as a child. And we were living in Atlanta, and we decided we would move to one of the most expensive places in the country to live, to work in comics. And we just packed up our car, stuffed everything we could in it, and drove up, and we roomed for a while with an artist named Paul Smith, who was doing the X-Men then. He was kind enough to let us stay with him until we found our own place. And that's what we did.
Was that before or after you had gotten on Power Pack?
I think I had gotten on Power Pack. I
knew you had
I knew I would have some money coming
Good.
in. Yeah, that's true.
Good.
At least we had that. We could pay our rent.
Yeah.
And Louise, you were talking about how you were an editor. You were working on X-Men. And so did that experience as an editor help you kind of figure out the pacing of comics and how to hit that deadline every month?
It probably did. It sure gave me an appreciation for editors. As when I was on the freelancer side, I really began to appreciate, when you're an editor and you're doing some job, you're like, okay, this is the job I'm doing. I'm faking it, but, nobody seems to notice too much, so it's good. And then you get working with somebody else, and you really appreciate a lot more the efforts that you had made, because you see the efforts that they had made from the freelancer side, and you really appreciate the other people you're working with more, I think. Shooter was right. Jim Shooter wanted his editors to freelance. And I had resisted a while because I had a job as an editor, and I thought it would be taking away work from people that I knew needed the work because they supported their families by writing stuff, and I knew I couldn't draw anything. So that's why I created something rather than tried to get in another book. But I don't know. I mean, why am I telling you this? I don't even remember. So for some reason, I'm telling you this anyway.
He asked you a question.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you asked me a question.
I'm sure I did. It was just more about, I guess, learning the craft from watching the scripts come in?
Oh, I honestly probably learned my craft as much from Chris Claremont, from being an editor and looking what other people had done, rather than, getting any kind of a formal education.
You also were reading a number of really good books on writing that you turned me on to.
Oh,
like
yeah, well, I did that too.
Book, and there were some other ones that. So you were like out there.
Oh yeah, I mean, I did have to read stuff to learn how to do it. Mm-hmm. I never had a writing class specific. There's a lot of good information out there.
Yeah.
But honestly, looking at Chris and how he did it, how he would tease people with, I don't know, possibilities and dangling plot lines, which everyone complained about, and how everything was important. Somebody turning their head in a Chris book is an important event. So, I kind of learned stuff from him as well. So I think I learned as much from the people I worked with as they, said that they appreciated me. I think I appreciated them maybe more.
Well,
I don't know, did that help?
that answered my
That was
question.
a crazy answer. Okay.
But I see we have about 15 minutes or so left in our session. I was wondering if we wanted to turn it over to our guests.
Does anybody have any questions? Oh,
So I'd be interested to hear from the group, like, what your creative environment looks like now, where you write and draw, and how it compares to when you started.
oh,
I still sit in a small room with a pencil. I still use a pencil and paper. I pencil. I rarely ink. I like inking, but I've never inked a whole comic book. I get a script and I read it, and I don't break down. I sit down and I draw what are called little thumbnails, little versions, little scribbles that really only I can understand. And I go through the story, and I don't do that for the whole story at once because it's the hardest process for me. But I will go scene by scene. I will try to do little thumbnails of each scene, and then I take a piece of 11 by 17 board and start drawing. And I have a very nice space. It's not a tiny room, it's a nice sized room. I'm surrounded by books, a lot of books. I also have a lot of artwork on the walls by different artists I like. Some comic book artists. I have a gorgeous Joe Kubert Viking Prince page hanging up. I have caricatures of me one is done by Walt Simonson. The other is done by, it's not a caricature, it's just a little sketch of me by Joe Kubert. Artwork, I also have artwork by an artist I admire, an equestrian artist named Sam Sabat. And the rest of my studio is pretty much filled with cats. There are cat beds, and I have to watch when I roll back my chair that I don't roll it on a cat's tail. And I very often have a cat in my lap. And I have a lovely sliding glass door that looks out onto a deck where I have my bird feeders that I enjoy looking at and my cats enjoy looking at. And that's it. That's my workspace and my work process.
okay. All right. Back in the olden days, I had, well, if you've read the early Power Packs, you know what our apartment looked like. And the room that was the boys' room was where I worked, only it's much expanded in the comic. This is, in the olden days. So it used to be what's called a maid's room, which is, we had an apartment on the Upper West Side, and it was like a little, narrow closet-sized room, and I would work back there. The first script I sold, the Power Pack script, took my money and I went out and I bought a computer.
K-Pro?
A K-Pro computer that was, oh gosh, it was actually not a bad word processing program. So I went a dot matrix printer. And, I would sit back there and work. I mean, I can work in a very small space. Now my space is larger because we have a house in the suburbs, and I'm, up on the top floor. My husband, Walter, is on the bottom floor, so that, if we have to run up 3 flights of stairs to when we need to communicate during the day, which is good for our steps and exercise. I've got June's the page where the Power Pack from Power Pack number 1, your page where Friday opens and it says my alien, where Katie says my alien. I've got that. I've got a Rose O'Neill drawing on the wall. I've got a Jeff Darrow drawing on the wall.
Oh, wow.
And I've got lots of bookcases. So, and then piles of junk over on the side that I keep meaning to get rid of but haven't. And a closet filled with like reprints of stuff that I probably should bring to conventions and give away, but never, we're too lazy to. So that's pretty much it. We had a little dog for a while, and he had his little bed, but he lived to be 19, so. Wow. Yeah, he's over the Rainbow Bridge now, but.
What the name was of the dog?
Well, Loki, my little dog's name was Loki. So that's pretty cushy right now. We live a nice life. How about you, Carl?
I have a 2-bedroom cottage. It's 100 years old. I'm constantly trying to fix the latest thing that goes kablooey on it. So my bedroom serves also as my studio, one corner of it. And I teach at School of Visual Arts. Some of my classes are on-site in New York City, but some of them are virtual. So I have this big wooden screen room divider type thing I put behind me so they can't see whether I've made up my bed or not in the background. I used to have an all-white Soji screen, but then my head would disappear into the white. So I got a darker wood one. So I do almost all my work there. I've got computer set and all that, but the vast majority of my artwork is done traditionally, and then if I have to make some other modifications, I'll often scan it and put it into Photoshop and mess with it or whatever. But most of my students these days are working on their tablets, either using Procreate or Clip Paint Studio or whatever they're calling it these days. I have to force myself to. I've bought a new tablet, and a nice one, sort of a Korean version of a Cintiq 2 years ago, and it's still collecting dust. I just haven't had the time to really give myself a tutorial or take a tutorial on it. I signed up for a tutorial, and they keep sending me these reminders. You haven't done this yet. So at some point I will. I really want to do it. Just I need another 48 hours in the day.
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, over there in the back, or in the green shirt?
Yeah, so why don't Margaret and Jim Power ever notice that all these strange things just keep happening to their children?
Amnesia.
Okay, the reason that they never notice is because Byrell, who's is he Kofi's father? No, he's Kofi's grandfather or uncle or something. Can't remember now. Oh, this is sad. Put a spell on them because they were starting to freak out about stuff. And he put a spell on them to kind of, because these chameleon disorders, some of them have magical powers. And it was supposed to just keep them calm, but it overshot, so that now they don't really notice things, except for now when the mother starts beginning to notice things, she becomes frantic. Because it's really hard when you know something is happening, and yet reality is denying what's happening. Her reality has been altered. Then it makes you kind of crazy. So she's having a problem with this now. Eventually, I'm sure we will resolve it. Or maybe not. I don't know. Have they resolved it yet in the Marvel Universe? Okay, well, there you go.
How about you up front?
Is there like something that kind of gave you the idea for the power pack, like switching powers?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, it was actually. When I wrote the first story, I had powers in mind, but I didn't quite know who would get the powers. And as I wrote it, I thought, well, the powers came to the people who needed them at that point. And then I said, well, maybe it's set up that way. Maybe the powers actually, if other people had needed the power at a specific time, then someone else would have gotten, the explosive power that Katie has, or the flight power that Julie has, or Jack's cloud power. So I said, sure. And I know how to make our readers hate us, so I switched their powers around, and people got mad. We did fix it in the end. We put everybody back where they belonged when we thought that was going to be the end of Power Pack as a franchise, the holiday special.
The switch, it seemed like a natural to me, Jack, who's kind of like the pompous brat of the bunch, his power in a lot of ways, at least unless he's using it just right, seems like the least dynamic.
Right. And yet, Jack has figured all sorts of ways to use his power.
But when he finally got the power switch, then he felt like he'd come into his own.
Yeah,
Or
and he
whatever.
used to boss. Which power did he get? Can you remember?
He got. Did he get the explosive power?
Explosive power. Yes, I think
I think so.
he did. I think he
Right.
got the explosive power. And he used to try to boss Katie into doing things.
With great power comes.
Right, and then it was harder when it's your power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun. The characters have been defined so well that when the powers got switched, you could see how their individual take on the different powers.
Yeah.
And what power did Alex get?
Alex.
Or did he get the explosive? Now I'm so confused.
What did he do?
No,
Who can remember?
Can't remember.
This is really sad. Somebody tell us. Let's see. Okay. Katie, which one? June.
know.
Oh my God. I should know this.
Me too.
Okay. All right. All right.
Somebody Google it, really.
All right. Jack got
Gravity power?
gravity power. I'm trying to
Cannot
remember.
remember.
But
Probably. Why can I not remember this? This is sad. Your brain starts to go
This is what happens.
after a certain point.
I blame my hair color.
All right, let's see. Who else has?
I was curious about who designed the costumes for the kids and what was the inspiration? Was it Fantastic Four and say a uniform look good, or?
I mean, like I said, especially at this point, I had very little experience with comics. I had started reading comics and paying attention to the artwork. I just knew I wanted to do something different. I didn't want them to have underwear or a belt, which I kind of later regretted because that's a very good way of defining how you're seeing the figure. It's harder to draw the onesies like they wear. I wanted something asymmetrical. I wanted something that had black because it's important in your artwork to have areas that are solid black to make things stand out. And I thought if I had some of that, they'd stand out. And then their boots, what can I say, it was the 80s, you know. So that, I probably saw that somewhere. They kind of look like snow boots. That was about it.
Look very comfy.
Yeah, they did. And the sort of thing that a chameleon spaceship might design for some human kids.
Yeah, Friday wouldn't know what superheroes were
No,
wearing.
right.
So, there.
June left the book later on, and actually Louise left too, on both of you were replaced by John Brigman. What was your decision to leave the book, and was there any fear that, what if I made a mistake leaving this book that's popular?
I think I just was having a lot of trouble keeping up with producing a regular series, producing a book a month. So I went away for a while and did a lot of fill-in issues on different jobs. And I did eventually get faster. I still don't have a ramming speed in my work. If I need to get more done, I just kind of have to spend more hours at the board. But it wasn't like I'm sick of it or I don't love it anymore or anything like that. It was more of a decision just based on my lack of speed. It was very, very hard for me. And they kept having fill-ins.
It was constant high pressure for you, too. Because
it was, but I did kind of figure, actually I was talking about this with Carl last night. I did Alpha Flight for like a year, and I think I actually made my deadlines on that.
So you replaced the book with 4 characters in it with a book with 8 characters.
Yeah, but I did eventually kind of figure it out. But it had nothing to do with, I still love the characters and love Wheezy's writing. It just, it was easier for me to do the fill-ins for a while.
It's kind of like anything else. I mean, you could love chocolate cake, but if you eat chocolate cake for years on end, you want key lime pie now.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
Are there any figures or incidents, like events from your own childhoods that you worked in? Was there a school teacher?
Gee. I did a thing where Katie lost, it was up in the first 4 issues, Katie lost her tooth. And Jack ended up, I think he started off making fun of her or whatever, and he ended up being, he was kind of mean, because Jack could be mean sometimes. And then he began to feel guilty, and he went and actually found her tooth. And that, I think, came from, a childhood incident back in the olden days when I was like 6. But, part of the thing was with that, one of the things that I had noticed too when I was coming up with the idea was I was in Central Park, and there was a little kid who was trying to learn to do roller skates. And she kept falling over. She would skate a little bit, and she would slip, and down she would go. And I thought, wow, if you had powers, most powers at least, you would still have to learn how to do just ordinary human things. It didn't give you the ability to just do everything. So I think it was that sort of thing that played into it. It's like the ordinary and the extraordinary kind of melded together.
Nobody asked about the legendary pilot.
Oh, okay,
goodness,
hold on.
Yeah. You tell us about the legendary pilot.
Would you please tell us about the legendary pilot?
Okay.
It was horrible.
It was horrible. Yeah, it was not good.
It was happy, nothing.
Yes.
It wasn't shown.
It was sweet. They didn't tell us about it at all. At least I didn't know about it.
I didn't know about it.
when it was done.
I got a call from some person in Canada who said, "How did you like it?" And I said, "Like what?" And he said, "The Power Pack pilot." And I said, "What Power Pack pilot?"
And I think you must have told me that, and I did some inquiring, and then I eventually got sent a VHS.
Yeah, they sent us a VHS too.
And I don't think they'd had the special effects added in yet, if I remember right. But none of the cast fit any of the kids, and they weren't particularly good actors.
The script was terrible.
It was everything was over the top.
I actually thought the kids were kind of cute, but I do that generally. So.
But I guess somebody somewhere saw that this was not a good thing to release, so they never did. So hopefully someday someone will do it right.
Yeah. If you go on the internet, though, you can find it.
Yeah.
It's there. Oh, yeah.
I remember they used to sell pirated DVDs at conventions for a while.
Oh, yeah. I would really love to see a Power Pack done in the same animation style as the Marvel What If series that came, was it last year?
Yeah.
Those cards, I thought that was really well done. I love the style of that, and that's what I'd like to see happen.
I know, maybe someday.
Yeah, could happen.
I have one more.
One more.
Have y'all heard anything about, on that part, like with the, like Disney Plus having the Power Pack, that is like, with like a show or anything on there?
I hear some talk, but there's been no action
For the past,
as far as we know.
30 years,
Yeah.
I've been hearing about, somebody will come up to me, a screenwriter, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I wrote this treatment for blah, 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 for such and such a company," and, nothing ever comes of it, so.
I think the director who I want to say Guardians of the Galaxy, was it him that wanted to do a Power Pack, but he wanted to make it like dark and scary, and which I really hope doesn't happen.
Yeah.
That's what you need, a Dark Knight treatment for Power Pack.
I mean, one of the great things about the Marvel movies as opposed to the DC movies is that the Marvel movies are fun. There's scary stuff happens, but they're not dark and evil and stuff. So
Most of them have managed to capture that combination of the fun and the excitement and the drama and all that the
I mean,
books.
they're dramatic, but they're not dismal.
Thank God Power Pack will never have to meet the Joker. That would not be good.
Yeah,
Would it be 2 pages?
At DC, they did some really neat, interesting stuff, but, the stuff that was unrelentingly dark, like Watchmen and The Dark Knight and all that, it was just, it was well done and all that, but it was just unrelentingly dark.
Mm-hmm. They were elevator drops instead of roller coaster rides.
Yeah.
Oh, one more.
You said you had a 5-part series that Marvel has, I think that y'all have finished from what I've heard. Any idea when that'll be out, or is it paper shortage, or?
There's the paper shortage, and this is what I was told, I guess.
Yeah,
There are a
it's
batch
all
of
done.
there are a batch of things that are in the pipeline, completely done, and are just waiting for the paper to come in.
Are they kids in, or are they adult? Oh,
This is classic 80s Power Pack.
That's what we do.
They're still kids. I grew Julie with books, not her phone. Yeah, it's back to the 80s.
Yeah. Yay.
Well, how about a round of applause for June, Louise, and Carl?